What's up, everybody? Chris here from Chris Gates Fitness and the online fitness training camp. Thanks for letting me pop in for a few seconds to tell you about what we got going on in training camp this month. And there's a lot happening, okay? The August program dropped just a few days ago. Everybody's getting into their August workouts, having a blast. The private group is full of discussion and chatter about people getting started, which I love to see. We're going to be doing weekly football pick'em here at the end of the month. That's when that starts. I'm going to be giving away free supplements to people who win that. I'm giving away a treadmill in September because we're doing a step count challenge as a group. All kinds of fun stuff coming. So I hope to see you there. Voice of College Football has a discount code VOICE. You can still get a discount on your first month if you want to jump in. Would love to see you there. Talk to you in training camp.
Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Also appreciate our sponsor, our partner, Chris Gates Fitness and Training Camp. So get yourself in shape, focus on football, of course, but maybe focus on yourself first. The link is in the description section of the video. For the time being, our show is The College Football Show. And again, we are taking your name suggestions as we just launched last week, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way from now through the national championship game. You can count on us every Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And you know the deal if you've been watching. We will go for one full action-packed hour. And it's up to you in regards to whether you want to see more and support the channel, support the show for us to go to overtime. We've got three great guests today. And of course, we're taking your calls as well. The link's in the chat if you would like to call. And we've got a number of great topics lined up, but let's get to our guests. We got Kevin Borba on the line. You can catch Kevin's work at Athlon Sports and also at the Locked On Network. Kevin, what's going on today?
How are we doing? Good to see you.
Doing well. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by for a bit of a fall camp update on Colorado. So, of course, this is one of the more intriguing situations in college football. And we just took a poll yesterday that we'll update everyone on. We were looking for the most hated man in college football. We hope there aren't too many people out there taking that literally, but in a sports context, hated person. And after a few hundred votes, Deion Sanders was leading the way at that point. When you're loved, you're hated and vice versa. So I'm sure he would also be, I believe, the most loved figure in college football. So let's start there. This is a guy, and it was stated by one of our guests this week very well, that aside from the sport, he is the most independently famous person in the sport of college football. Everybody else, it's dependent on their job. Kirby Smart, Nick Saban previously, it's all Deion Sanders. He's already built up this celebrity. So do you think he's been effective in terms of separating celebrity versus what he needs to do to be a full-time head coach there, and whether that's workable in the future?
I think he hasn't separated it, but I think it's a good thing that he hasn't, right? I think his celebrity is what helped generate all the buzz when they went 3-0 last year. I think his celebrity is what gets people like The Rock or Offset or like Terrell Owens or all these famous people on campus at Colorado. And when you're a program like Colorado that doesn't have the endless NIL funds, I think you have to use the other resources that you have. And so Deion Sanders being so famous is a resource, whether people want to admit it or not. And so I think it's probably better that he hasn't separated his fame from Colorado, because he's generating more attention and more sort of buzz about Colorado. They increased the amount of applicants they received. The local economy has boomed ridiculously, and Colorado gets primetime TV games all the time. So I feel like he hasn't, but I feel like it's a good thing that he hasn't.
Yeah, you make a great point there. It's difficult for them to be relevant in this college football world. Of course, they were 30 years ago in winning a national championship and having a long run of success. But this is a different deal. So what else catches people's attention? Of course, we've got College Football Nation not being able to track these teams every day and get the granular of what's being worked on, but it's more about, okay, this went viral. This is this is a situation, this was a comment, and then that defines the program. And of course, the latest that I've come across is the comment about, here Shedeur, we don't touch him. Here Travis Hunter, we don't touch him. We operate like an NFL team. And that seems to be something else that he's selling, is that we're bringing the NFL to college football and we're going to run it like a business.
Yeah, I think I feel like a lot of the times we talk about Deion Sanders, we're reading into a lot of what he does, probably a little too much, which is fine because he's so polarizing. But yeah, I think it's smart to talk about Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter like that. Realistically, most teams across college football don't want their quarterbacks getting hit in practice. The only program that I personally know of that sort of allows contact was Utah. They'll do like a full contact camp every once in a while. I don't think they're doing it this year actually, but there's really, I think it's smart of him to sort of set the tone of like, hey, although we're not in the NFL, we are treating this like we are in the NFL. That is the goal for everyone on the team, to make it to the NFL. So I think he's just treating his team like what he knows. He knows pro football. He knows that he wasn't allowed to touch the quarterbacks. He knows that the best players got days off. Like Travis Hunter played the most snaps in college football last year, and he missed 3 games from injury. So you want to keep Travis healthy. You want to keep Shedeur healthy. And so I think the team sort of has an understanding of that. I think it just obviously we sort of associate those 2 players as being his favorites, but they happen to be their best players. And so you want to protect your best players. You want to protect your investments, if you will. And then they obviously have a lot of NFL coaching experience or NFL experience on their coaching staff. They have Warren Sapp out there. They have a few other guys. Robert Livingston spent like a decade in the NFL. He's now the defensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur. So they sort of know what they're doing in terms of ushering in an NFL culture. And so I don't mind it as long as everyone's improving still, and as long as everyone's sort of getting the necessary reps. I think everything's fine.
Kevin Borba is here to break down some Colorado football for us, coming off 4-8, but of course that was a 3-game improvement from the previous season. And you can catch Kevin's work at Athlon Sports and the Locked On Network. So let's get to the football. Shedeur Sanders gains a lot of attention for other things, and his connection there with Deion, of course, his father, but he is one of the most accurate passers in college football and did a remarkable job leading his team considering offensive line woes. And once the Flash succumbed to depth issues and offensive line issues, and they started to lose games, then people started to focus on, this isn't necessarily a strong football team and a sturdy football team top to bottom. So Dylan Edwards moves to Kansas State. Dallin Hayden, of course, one of the big pickups. Your assessment of the offense and whether they have fortified themselves up front where it counts.
Yeah, I think they've more than fortified themselves up front. Realistically, that offensive line last year was probably the worst in the country. They gave up like 50, I think it's 5 sacks total. Shedeur Sanders was sacked like 52 times, if I'm not mistaken. So he was sacked a lot. I think it really limited what they were able to do on offense. They couldn't run the ball. And so you kind of had an offense where everyone knew what was coming, and Shedeur Sanders was still able to throw 27 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, with all 3 of his interceptions being late in games or tipped. So the new offensive line, they bring in around, they just added a new one yesterday, a new offensive lineman yesterday. So I think they have around 12 new offensive linemen. A lot of these guys played well at their previous stop, and they have an opportunity to sort of curate a new offense. Like realistically, they're going to have a new offense with Pat Shurmur anyway, but they have an opportunity to sort of establish the run. They have an opportunity to develop play action passes. And so I think for Shedeur Sanders and just people in general, like you have to realize he put up those big numbers with a terrible offense line. So if this group can be just average, I'd be a little scared if I was an opposing defense.
So, Kevin, can you run down the other offensive weapons and who's back and who's new?
Yeah, so at receiver, we obviously have Travis Hunter. He's playing both ways. They bring in a receiver from Vanderbilt named Will Shepherd, who's about 6'3", 6'4". He's massive. Even though it was Vanderbilt, he put up some pretty big numbers in the SEC, and he's already someone that has been making some noise over there in Boulder. They have LeJohntay Wester, who came in from Florida Atlantic, and I think he was first or second in the country in catches. He had over 100 catches last year. He's probably the fastest player, if not on the team, in the country. He's one of the just quickest guys out there. Him and Shador Sanders have already built a rapport. He was actually, I'm sure everyone has seen it, he was the receiver in the edited video on social media the other day where everyone thought it was two separate clips. Just a weird social media sort of risk, I would say, by Colorado, but it wasn't edited. And then they also have Jimmy Horn returning, who he was electric for them last year as well. So they have a lot of speed, a lot of size, and then they have a few freshmen and underclassmen transfers who haven't played much, but are expected to have some sort of impact. So it's Cordell Russell from TCU. He's like 6'3". He's built. He's ginormous. They have Draylon Miller, who's a 4-star recruit in this past class. So they have a lot of weapons all over the place. And then their running back room is pretty stout as well. So Colorado's offense, I imagine, will be one of the more prolific ones in college football.
Myself and just about anyone who loves college football got very familiar with their personnel the first 4 weeks of the season when they were in the spotlight. We were watching every game, and I got to say I kind of lost track once they got mired in this losing streak.
Right.
And I should put my phone on silence every time I go to air. And of course, I have yet to do my deep dive on Colorado. So thanks for stopping by, Kevin. Appreciate you breaking things down. Jackson, thank you so much for dropping Kevin's X account link in the chat. It's right there in the chat. It's down below if you want to copy that and follow Kevin's work at Athlons and Locked On. The defense, of course, was horrific as well.
Yep.
What are the additions and changes that bring some hope on that side of the ball?
Yeah, so similar to the offensive line, they brought in probably what's going to be a completely new defensive line. They brought in guys like Deion Hayes from Pitt, who was a key player for Pitt. He was a starter, Pittsburgh native or Pennsylvania native, and was someone that Pitt was really hoping could help them contend for something this year. And I don't know if everyone's familiar, but he was the transfer that was like, I'm leaving because I don't think we could contend. And then he ended up transferring to Colorado. So he obviously thinks very highly of Colorado. They have a guy named Chidozie Nwankwo from Houston who – he's a defensive tackle that's like 5'11" and 295 pounds-ish, but he's a ball of muscle, former high school state champion at wrestler, so he's very physical. They brought in a ton of talent just all over the place. They took a flyer on a couple of former blue-chip recruits that really hadn't played. Anquin Barnes started his career at Alabama. He's 6'5", 315 pounds. Quincy Wiggins, another big dude from LSU. And then I liked what they did specifically in the secondary. They brought in a guy named DJ McKinney who started at Oklahoma State this past year as a freshman or a redshirt freshman. Deion Sanders has already said that he has first round talents. McKinney does, and so you have him, and then you bring in Preston Hodge from Liberty, who is also really good and one of the highest graded corners in all of college football according to PFF. So you have those two guys and Travis Hunter, and I think the secondary not only is looking a lot better, but you're now able to sort of give Travis a break if needed be on defense as well. So they brought in a lot more talent all over the place, and it's really interesting to see how it comes together. Obviously, we haven't really seen them all together because not all of them were there for spring, and even then the spring game's a glorified practice. So week 1 against North Dakota State will be their biggest test on defense. Can they stop the run? Can they get physical? Last year, the answers to both those questions were no.
Deion probably half joking, but he's made comments about North Dakota State not necessarily being the best week 1 opponent because they're not going to be given much credit for the victory, and it's going to be a tough go. All you have to do is look at North Dakota State against some pretty good Power 5 programs over the last 5 to 10 years, and they just about always play it close, if not pull off an upset. So that will be a challenge.
Yep. Yeah, North Dakota State is one of those programs where they've won, I think it's like 9 championships in the past decade or so. They've beaten, I talked about it on my show yesterday, they beat Kansas in 2010. They've beaten Kansas State. They've beaten Minnesota. They beat a top 15 ranked Iowa team, and they're doing this all on the road. So like they don't care who you are, they don't care where you're from. They will beat you, they will embarrass you. And for Colorado, I look at it as one of two ways, right? You can make a statement. They play them on a Thursday night, so I think it's a standalone game on ESPN, and you have a chance to sort of, everyone is kind of pushing or expecting Colorado to get upset by North Dakota State. So if you beat them, that's a statement win. Now, if you lose, it's obviously a very tough start to your season, and people will hop on you as much as they did last year when you were under that losing streak. So you have to sort of get ready right away. It's not like you're playing the Citadel. It's not like you're playing one of these FCS programs where it's like you're going to beat them by 60 and pay them $1 million. No, this is a team that fully thinks they could beat you, and they probably, if ever everything goes right for North Dakota State, can beat Colorado.
All right, Kevin. Well, hopefully we can catch up sometime before then. And if not, there's that big Nebraska game. Of course, Husker fans are really looking for revenge. And Colorado, right. I know that Jeff Sims was a turnover machine in that game, and it had much to do with it. But certainly the Buffaloes took it away in the second half and now have to go to Lincoln. And that's a much anticipated primetime game. That's a week 2 game, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, right after the next week. Interesting. Good stuff.
Yep.
Kevin, want to make sure that everybody can find your work. So let us know what you've got available.
Yeah, I'm over at Athlon Sports covering a lot of college football. Athlon's taken a little bit of fire lately because of a recent article. I'll just tell you from what I know of going on in Colorado, the whole Grand Theft Auto stuff was I didn't have the same sentiment shared to me. So we'll just leave it at that. But other than that, I'm covering trending news, all things college football. I'm doing a lot of Olympics coverage right now, which has been really fun because you get to learn about new sports, whether it be track, gymnastics. And then I'm also over at Locked on Buffs, where I'm covering Colorado and Deion Sanders every single day. We're talking about something. I did my record predictions yesterday and had a blast doing it. So make sure to go check it out.
Kevin, appreciate you being here. Football's almost here, and thank you so much for breaking down the Buffs for us.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good one. Bye.
Kevin Borba, Athlon Sports and Locked On, does a great job there. And again, Colorado, intriguing. We will see them against North Dakota State and then Nebraska. All right. We remind everyone, Monday through Friday, this is your spot, 10 a.m. Eastern time. Tell your friends, bring in 1, 2, or 50 with you on Monday. And Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, 1 hour promised. And we will deliver that with as many great guests, rants from me, your calls. So the line will always be in the chat. And also we post to X. That's Twitter for some of you. We post to X just minutes before the show. So the call-in line, if you ever need to find it, go to the Voice of College Football account on X, where you should be following us, of course, for great posts throughout the day, every day in the off season. And then once the season starts, look out. So that is all available to you, as well as another big day here at the Voice of College Football. So our schedule looks like this. We have just determined here in the last few minutes. Oklahoma live at 4 Eastern. Clemson live at 5:30. The trivia show with Joey Foster at 9 o'clock on the West Virginia channel. And then, of course, the USC call-in show caps the night. Matt Semick, Tim Prangley on the USC channel. They take your calls. It is the best USC call-in show that you will find anywhere. Tim and Matt, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. Again, we jump around with the Oklahoma show. We are not able to pin down a particular day and time every week. So please subscribe to the Oklahoma channel and follow those notifications to know when we go live. Today is going to be 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. where it counts in Norman, Oklahoma. Jason Ray and myself talking Sooners. Jordan and Tiger Paw Craven with Clemson live at 5:30. All right, again, 1 hour packed here every day. Imagine once we get to football season, we are going to have 1 hour just flying by, talking to you, my rants, my evaluation of games, my previews, and then, of course, guests all over the place. And we hope to go to overtime. We would love to be on here for 4 or 5 hours every day, and we leave that in your hands. All right. Let's get to, while we're waiting for more guests, don't see any comments or questions from you. Maybe we do. What do we got here? We've got our buddy Lonnie. Lonnie Johansson, BYU fan, just became a YouTube member. Lonnie, thank you so much for that. What I am jotting down right this second, Lonnie, is to post the Discord link. So you will get a Discord link that will be posted to the community page. And I will do that and send that to solely just the members here at the Voice of College Football. And I can't say anything right now because we're still putting it together, but within the next few days, we will have a exciting announcement for a particular type of college football fan out there. For many of you could care less about it. That's great. But for many of you, you will be excited at an offering that we will have better than ever coming up this season. So the Discord link for Lonnie and anybody else that wants that. And basically, it's college football talk over there 24/7, 365. If you're not familiar with Discord, it's basically just one huge forum of college football. It's just one big message board. We've got it divided by national and each conference, and go take it a look. Go give it a look. And all the other offerings. So one of the other ones, Lonnie, we appreciate you being here, is that one video request of me per month. So if you've got anything that you would like to request, just serve that up and we will take it from there. All right, let's get to a couple items that I've come across. One courtesy On3. So there we see the 12-team college football playoff field as predicted by On3. It looks to be fairly close to chalk. What these folks are telling us is that Georgia is going to win the SEC, Ohio State the Big Ten, Florida State the ACC, and Utah the Big 12. That's chalk. All those schools are favorites. Probably the weakest favorites would be, well, really, Georgia's the most secure favorite according to Vegas. Ohio State is actually maybe not technically a favorite because they've got the road game at Oregon. I have seen some lists, including ESPN's FPI, which ranks Oregon above Ohio State. And I think it's largely because Ohio State goes to Oregon. Obviously, that will not necessarily decide the Big Ten championship, although unless one of them loses another game and gets knocked out of the Big Ten championship game, there could be a rematch right there. There could be a rematch a number of ways in the SEC with this new format. It used to be pretty easy to determine, okay, what games could produce possible rematches in the conference championship game. But for Georgia right now, they've got a date at Texas. They've got a date at Alabama. They've got a date at Ole Miss. Those could all be rematches in the SEC championship game. Florida State plays Miami. They play Florida. They play Notre Dame non-conference. And of course, that has nothing to do with the conference slate. So it's conceivable that Florida State could lose to Florida and Notre Dame and be a 9-3 football team, 10-3 with the conference championship game win, and be the 3 seed. That is going to be interesting because it's pretty much projected by the national polls. And we showed you the other day with the coaches poll how accurate the coaches poll has been the last 3 seasons. 25 picks per season, of course. We're talking about the preseason top 25 that runs 1 through 25. If you checked out the video we posted the other day, guess how many correct predictions, if that's what you want to call it, the coaches poll made in the top 25 the last 3 years out of 75. So 25, 25, 25 in terms of matching the preseason top 25 with the final top 25 out of 75. You guys can take a guess on that one. Now, to be fair, somebody asked me, well, how close have your preseason predictions been to the final top 25? Well, I make preseason predictions, but they can't be measured in a top 25 because I don't make preseason top 25 predictions, because I think it's, at least for me, kind of stupid to make a prediction about what other people are going to vote on. That's like people have asked, make a prediction on the Heisman Trophy. Well, I make a prediction on football games and football championships because that's objective. But to make a prediction on what other people are going to vote on, okay. The final top 25 is, of course, skewed by perception. I will do it again this year, I'm sure, when the final top 25 comes out, and I will let everyone know, look at this team outside the top 25, that team, that team. You could go to about 8 teams at the end of the season and make an argument as to why they should have been in the top 25. So I don't make a preseason prediction. Now we release the top 25 that actually makes sense, preseason edition, and that even goes against what the intent of the top 25 that actually makes sense is. If you're unfamiliar, you will find out here in a few weeks when we unveil the first one after week 1, and it blows people's minds and they don't understand and they think I don't know what I'm talking about because they don't listen to the criteria or understand it. But the top 25 that actually makes sense is predicated solely on results. Therefore, it doesn't make any sense to produce a preseason top 25 that actually makes sense, although we did because we were asked to. And I tried to make that solely as best I could based on last year's teams, what was added, what was subtracted. I did not look at schedules. It's all about how good are you, not what is your schedule. Lonnie, thank you so much for the contribution. Lonnie is taking us $5 closer to hour 2 here at the Voice of College Football. Lonnie says it's been 20 years for CU, been in the Big 12, Big 8. Yeah, so the history there is obviously Colorado in the Big 8. They transitioned to the Big 12 in 1996. And then they went to the Pac-12 in 2012, 11, 12, one of those years in there. And CU was so inconsequential in the Big 12 that I've kind of lost track of, or in the Pac-12, so inconsequential. Of course, they had a nice run with the likes of even post Bill McCartney with Gary Barnett and Dan Hawkins, Rick Neuheisel, that they made quite a few Big 12 championship games, were largely unsuccessful in those games, running into Oklahoma and Texas, but being out of the North Division, made quite a few Big 12 championship games, and then they went to the Pac-12, and they basically had one splash in the Pac-12 in terms of wins and losses, and that was Mike McIntyre's 2016 team that went to the Big 12 Pac-12 championship and got embarrassed by Washington, and then got embarrassed by Oklahoma State in the Alamo Bowl, and pretty much proved to not really be that good of a football team. They just happened to be playing in a bad division that was down that year. And that's all Colorado's done in the Pac-12 besides being a TV ratings phenom at the start of last season with Dion. And now they're back in the Big 12. And the Big 12 is fascinating. 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 I love the Big 12. People get it misconstrued that I've got something against the Big 12. I love the Big 12. The Big 12 is going to have the most competitive football games. I would lay a bet down right this second that the points per game differential in the average Big 12 game is going to be less than any in the country. Meaning that if you took every score from every conference game and then you average the point differential, that the Big 12 will be playing the closest games of anybody in the country. I would make that bet right now. Joey, if you weren't around a few minutes ago, we were touting your trivia night on Fridays. Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the West Virginia channel. If you love trivia, and I think it's based on college football, but it delves into other sports and maybe some pop culture, I believe. You got Joey here. Thank you so much for the contribution, sir. I will have to add this to your next revenue share. Let's get another hour out of Mark. Dare him to have to work. Mark, give me your prediction for West Virginia this year. Those predictions are coming at some point. No predictions today. I can make a prediction. Don't hold me to it because it's not going to be my final prediction. That is a good segue, though, Joey, and reminds me that, let's see, first college football game is on August 24th, the week of August 24th, probably on Tuesday night, whatever date that is, the 20th. Sounds about right. We will be doing our big prediction show. So I'll probably send out as many prediction videos as possible. Actually, I produced my first last night, Penn State. So be looking out for that. And we'll send those out. And everybody keep in mind that I am looking for breakout teams. I am looking for teams in decline. I am not going to deliver really the kind of predictions that you see elsewhere because most people's predictions are way too conservative. We've discussed that many times. 26 teams in college football last year either raised their record by 3 games at least or had a decline in win-loss record by at least 3 games. 26 out of 70. That's more than a third of the sport. For example, in the Big Ten, what happened in the Big Ten that was so different last year from the year before? Well, Minnesota went from 8-4 to 5-7. Northwestern 1-11 to 7-5. Iowa went from 7-5 to 10-2. There were those 3. Purdue went from 8-4 to 4-8. So that's 4. Anybody else? If we expand on the Big Ten to the 4 incoming teams, USC went from 11-1 to 7-5. So that's 5 teams in the Big Ten that had that kind of drop or elevation. So what I'm saying is basically you've got to look for 1/4 to a third of the sport to find teams that will elevate at least 3 games or decline at least 3 games. And I guarantee if you put out a prediction video like I will, or do a live stream, and you have 25% or 30% of the teams either elevating by at least 3 games or declining by at least 3 games, there's going to be a slew of people that are going to say that you don't know what you're talking about and you're nuts. And of course, I'm going to miss it a bunch of times because that is the risk that you take in making outlandish predictions. And when I say outlandish, calculated risks predictions. But right now, let's look at West Virginia's schedule, since we may have Mountaineer Paul stopping by today, and we will see what West Virginia has to face, because I don't know who else out there is giving West Virginia much of a shot in week 1, but I am. And don't confuse this with me thinking that West Virginia is a better football team than Penn State. I do not. The deal is that it's called an upset. That's why we have upsets. That doesn't mean that the team is better. That means that they were better that particular day. If you go through the top 25, and this is good information for those of you who like to put a buck or 2 or 10 on football games, is that if you look at the top 25 every week, there's about 20 or 22 games in the top 25. And I guarantee this. Chart this yourself this season. Take the top 25 every week, look at the point spreads, and there will be every week 4 to 5 upsets. It's like clockwork. I've done this for about 4 years. And every week, okay, there are 4 or 5 upsets that are going to occur in the top 25 this week. And I'm not talking about, so anything that's like a 1-point spread, maybe a 1.5, maybe a 2, anything under a field goal, I don't really consider that to be an upset. Even if a team's a 4-point underdog, was that an upset? Not really. It was, according to Vegas and the money lines. And if you're into that side of it, it's technically an upset. I don't consider that to be an upset. Like, wow, that team is clearly not supposed to be able to beat that team. Really, anything under a touchdown, I don't consider to be some kind of major upset. But technically they are. So anything over a field goal, anything at 3 or over, I will count those as upsets. And there are 4 or 5. And I look at the board every week, and I look at the top 25 games, and I look at it and I think, Mark, find 4 to 5 upsets. Maybe we should look at the top 25 in the coaches poll and look at their games for week 1 and look at the point spreads and say, let's find 4 or 5 upsets, because there's going to be 4 or 5 upsets. And this might be one of them. Penn State, West Virginia. Consider this. Last year's game was closer than the final score would indicate. I believe it was 38-15. It was closer than that. It was a 1-score game. It was fluctuating between 1 score and 2 score for most of the second half in Happy Valley. In Happy Valley. Penn State is going to have a tremendous defense, but I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year. I believe they've taken a step back on defense because I believe from a talent perspective, they had the best defense in the country last year. Now, don't misconstrue my words. I did not say they had the best defense in the country. They had one of the 5 best defenses in the country. They had the most talented defense in the country last year. They were phenomenal on defense. Okay, so on the minus side for Penn State, in trying to form an argument for a West Virginia upset, I just gave you one. The defense is going to be really good, but may not be quite as good as it was last year. I don't expect it to be. 3 new coordinators for Penn State. Offense, defense, special teams, all new coordinators. Manny Diaz left to go to Duke to become the head coach. He's replaced by Tom Allen, who is much respected in the sport. The offensive line is supposed to be improved. They've got 2 great running backs, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, who had disappointing seasons because of their own, I'm not going to say poor play, but their failure to meet expectations themselves. Plus, of course, the offensive line had much to do with that. I don't believe that Penn State has addressed the wide receiver issue to the extent that they need to, that they should have. Julian Fleming is an excellent pickup from Ohio State, but he's not a game breaker, game changer. Drew Aller we will see what he is able to deliver. He's an excellent talent right now who took care of the football last year but could not produce big plays. And again, it all ties together. Every time you talk about, okay, the quarterback couldn't make big plays, well, the wide receivers weren't as good as they needed to be. They couldn't separate. It all is tied together. Okay, on the West Virginia side, the returning production is strong. Quarterback coming back, and maybe we got the best person that we could possibly find to talk about West Virginia football, since that is what we are doing right this second. And so we bring on our guy, Mountaineer Paul, stopping by. What's going on, sir?
Hey, how's it going, man? I'm a little bit late. I do apologize for that.
No, you're fine.
Glad to be
Well,
on.
you can see who we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I see that.
So I was asked about the West Virginia from our buddy Joey Foster in regards to a prediction for this season.
Yeah.
And I have been talking up this Penn State matchup, Mountaineer Paul, for a couple weeks now, because I think most people across the nation just kind of discard it. Penn State's a top 10 team. They'll probably go 10-2. This is a win. They beat them by 3 scores last year. That's that. I don't see it like that at all. And I'll give you my quick argument, and then we'll take the experts' take from you. Is number one, obviously, we're changing sites. We're changing venues from one of the toughest places to play in Happy Valley to another difficult place to play in Morgantown. So you flip the home road. I know that the players don't have the investment of the old-time rivalry of Penn State and West Virginia, but certainly West Virginia fans have to be stoked for this game because they used to play Penn State every year. There's a lot of, I don't want to call it bad blood like in reality, but football bad blood. This is a school that is obviously a nationally renowned football program, and Penn State and West Virginia used to get together every year, and it was a legit rivalry. I also see all the returning production coming back for West Virginia. Garrett Green at quarterback. I think Penn State's going to be tremendous on defense, but they were like lights out on defense last year, and last year's game was closer than the final score would indicate. So I see I think Penn State's decidedly a better team, but I see an upset opportunity here.
Yeah, so I have questions about Penn State in a couple key areas. Number one, they lost a ton off the offensive line. And I think that's one of their, if you're looking for weaknesses on the Penn State football team, there aren't many. But there are 2 key areas, I think, that I've noticed where West Virginia does have an advantage, and that is our defensive line versus their offensive line. They were replacing the entire middle of that offense, plus one of the best tackles in the country, and Pashanu, or however you say his last name, Pashanu, was a first-round pick that's gone. And although they have high-end players to plug in, as you know, it doesn't matter really. In game 1, there's going to be growing pains, and that's the best time for any defensive line to feast on a brand-new offensive line. And then their wide receiver room, Keandre Lambert-Smith goes to Auburn. He was the only wide receiver last year that really did any damage against West Virginia. They do have Tyler Warren back at tight end, but I trust Drew Aller. I do. I think he's going to be a much better player this year. I just think that the fact that West Virginia gets them in game 1, the fact they have 2 new coordinators in Kotelnicki and Allen, I think that's going to play a huge factor in this. Although Kotelnicki is very scary, we know from experience from his days at Kansas as a coordinator. And I think there are going to be opportunities for West Virginia to be in this game because of those what I consider to be pretty big deals. So as far as West Virginia goes, 93% of its offensive production is back off the number 1 Power 4 rushing team in the country. You've got 2 running backs that would start at 95% of the places in the country-ish. I mean, the 2 really high-end running backs. Jaheim White was the best freshman running back in the country last year. He led the nation in yards per carry. He only played in 7 games. He's a true home run hitter. We continually hear about the amazement from people around him. And then the offensive line probably be one of the 2 best that Penn State plays this year still. So even replacing Zach Frazier and Doug Nestor, they return 7 of the highest returning offensive linemen we've had probably in 3 or 4 years all come back this year. We've got 7 guys with several hundred snaps under their belt and starts. Every guy on this offensive line has started at another position at another point in time. And so at center, we've got a guy that started at left tackle as a true freshman. At right guard, we've got a guy that started multiple games through injury and whatever you want to call it, and Quay Hubbard. And so the offensive line is truly going to be, we've heard multiple people say it's going to be as good as last year, and they led Power 4 in rushing. We feel good about that. On the left side, obviously, Wyatt Milam is in consideration for the best left tackle in America. Obviously, there are guys that are in that conversation that may be a step ahead of him, but he's certainly a first-round pick. And then on defense, the front seven, the entire front seven is back for West Virginia. And so the only real question mark with West Virginia is, how is this wide receiver room going to play out? They've got 5 pass catchers back from last year that most people, they were really young. 3 of them were freshmen: Hudson Clement, Traylon Ray, and Rodney Gallagher. And so they all played a role last year in their own way. How are they going to develop in another year? Traylon Ray looks to be a number 1 receiver. And then you bring in Bray, who was the second leading receiver from Oklahoma State. And then Justin Robinson, who is a 6'4", 220-pound player from Mississippi State. And we feel really confident that both of those guys are going to play key roles. We got the number 1 JUCO tight end in the country to come in Genross, and he has wowed people in practice. But he won't overtake Cole Taylor, our 6'7", 250-pound LSU transfer from last year, who caught right around 50 balls and 4 touchdowns as a tight end, which is really good. We're happy with that. He's definitely not going to be supplanted easy. And then don't forget about Garrett Green, one of the most underrated players in college football. Led the nation in big-time throw rate last year with 30. He had 31 big-time throws. He led the nation under the 2-minute drill, according to Pro Football Focus. Max over at Pro Football Focus had him on my show. I had him look it up. Garrett Green led the country under 2 minutes last year. And so Garrett has to fix what he had to fix, which is the intermediate throws and the completion percentage. But he's a big game hunter, and he throws it deep as well or better than anybody in the country by the numbers. And we have an offense that can pound it. And so our formula last year was lead the Power 4 in rushing and let Garrett go deep. And that's not a bad formula, but we need his completion percentage to come up. And if it does, we're going to be extremely dangerous. I truly do believe that. I haven't had this much optimism going into a season in 8 years. So it's definitely we haven't been as excited as we are in a long time. Certainly it's not all sunshine and rainbows, Mark, but I do think that we have more than a puncher's chance in week 1 against Penn State.
And many people think that you have one of the toughest roads in the Big 12. I haven't really dissected that, but we're looking at it right now. And I typically, with these conferences, have become so big. When you start to analyze them, you got to look at, who is this team missing? Who are they not playing? And it looks like, well, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State. It looks like most of the big boys are there.
Arizona.
I guess Utah would be the one missing top contender. Arizona's there as well. So it looks like a tough schedule. Let me just ask you this one thing, Paul, before we let you go, as it pertains to the Penn State game and really the entire season for West Virginia. I'm not saying that, of course, West Virginia could play an excellent football game and lose to Penn State because they're probably one of the top 6 to 10 teams in the country. So I'm not talking about West Virginia goes out there and plays a great game and loses 27-24. But if the wheels are to come off against Penn State and maybe throughout this season, where are the areas of concern that could be an issue?
The back end for West Virginia is the biggest question mark on the team. Screen to me, you have an issue in the back end. You get 6 transfers at corner and safety, right? And a couple of those were converted from corner into safety. The coaching staff has continually said that, You know, this is the most talented group that they've had since they've been here. And luckily, we're lucky because our coaching staff usually, if they're saying something, there is some merit of truth to it. They're not just coach speaking. And so we're really placing a lot of stock in 2 players in the back end that are going to be brand new starters at corner, and that's going to be Aiden Garnes, who was just a stud at Duquesne last year. We played Duquesne, he didn't allow a catch. And then the other guy is Garnett Hollis, who started at Northwestern last year on an 8-5 team at corner. That was pretty salty on defense as well, Mark. I think you know that. And then his running mate in the back end at Northwestern, Jaheim Joseph, as well came with him. And so we're really hoping those guys plug some holes for us. So far, we've heard really good things about them in practice, but just the same thing goes for Penn State's offensive line, that goes for our back end, and probably even more so in a game against Drew Aller, and that's that it's going to be game 1. So that's iffy. But being that what Penn State's wide receiver room is basically brand new. I mean, Julian Fleming is a high-end player. We know that. But is he going to adjust well in game 1? A lot of this hinges on it being game 1. But you know, last year they called us in game 1. Garrett Green's first start ever. You know, what if they played us the way we were playing against North Carolina? I don't know. You know, I think they didn't catch the best version of us, and we caught a pretty good version of them in game 1 last year. So I am optimistic about it. But area of concern, Mark, definitely is our back end. Drew Aller had a great game against us last year. It's not lost on us. He does not throw interceptions very often. But he did struggle on the road a lot last year. So at Illinois was a bad game for him, and a few others that I've looked into. I think there's a path here if they can rattle him.
Mountaineer Paul's right here on YouTube, breaking down West Virginia football, the Big 12, and the nation. Also some basketball as well from the Mountaineers. Paul, we appreciate you stopping by. You know, you're welcome anytime. And good luck to you in week 1, and maybe we can get together one more time and break down some Penn State.
Sounds good, Mark.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Let's get in these super chats before we bring on our guy, Joey Weaver. Nick, thank you so much for that. 1984 BYU is the GOAT, or is the GOAT. No other team would beat them. I don't think there's any question about that. Inside joke, if you're hanging around here, because there is one particular caller that is fascinated with 1984 and BYU, and apparently my disrespect for BYU winning a national championship in 1984. WVU Scott, thank you so much for the contribution. We gave you some West Virginia talk there for 10 or 15 minutes. Good stuff. And out of Lonnie, who again is a new member to the Voice of College Football community just today, and follows it up with this one. Kansas State wins the Big 12 championship at 10-1. Apparently there's going to be a canceled game in there somewhere. Maybe a hurricane's coming through Kansas. So Lonnie, just do a little math there. They're also going to play a conference championship game. So get that number up to 13, but definitely to 12, because that's the number of games that we are playing these days. But Kansas State to win the Big 10 or the Big 12 championship. Thank you for that, Lonnie. We've got Joey Weaver checking in to talk some Georgia Tech football. Joey, it's been a while. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Been a busy summer on my end, but excited for college football season to get started. Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. And do you like the week 0? Everybody's going to watch some Georgia Tech football in week 0.
Well, it's one of those things, you know, I think the hardest shot in golf is when everyone's standing around watching you on the tee box. It feels a little bit that way with Georgia Tech starting the season. And, you know, you get a week 0 game like that. And a lot of these games are pretty low key games, you know, kind of maybe a power conference versus a non-power conference kind of game, or an FCS game even. And then Georgia Tech goes out and plays a ranked, you know, ACC opponent. And so, yeah, hope you don't make a mess all over yourself in front of God and everyone.
And folks, if you're not aware, that game, of course, when Georgia Tech and Florida State get together, it should be played in Dublin, Ireland. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be the latest edition of college football going overseas. What comes to mind in regards to possible upsets would be Northwestern, a team that failed to win a game on our continent that particular year. This was 2 seasons ago. Did beat Nebraska in week 1, and they couldn't win a game in North America from September until December, but they won that one and then lost 11 straight. So maybe something strange happens over there at noon Eastern time, our time, with Georgia Tech and Florida State.
I think that's completely on the table, honestly, and I'm sure we'll get into schedule at some point. And Georgia Tech's schedule very tough this year, and that's a big one of it is that Florida State game to start off with. But I'm kind of with you, Mark. I mean, I think if there's a time that you want to get Florida State this year, with all the rebuild that they're having to do and all the replacements that they're having to do, it's probably right off the bat. And especially, going across the pond into a really odd environment and just getting everybody out of whack. I mean, I think that provides the best opportunity that you're going to have to beat Florida State and pull off what would be a pretty significant upset. I think right now they're like 12, 13-point favorites in that game.
But that 12-13, that also tells me that it's not some 25-point affair in Vegas's eyes. And 12 and 13 points, that's certainly substantial. There is a clear-cut favorite here, no doubt. But I am no odds maker or handicapper, but I do enjoy looking at all of that and make my predictions. And I was just reminding people just a few minutes ago that if you take the top 25 every week, and it's crazy how this plays out. It's almost like clockwork every week. If you take those 20 to 22 games played within the top 25, there are 4 to 5 upsets. There are 20 to 25% of the games are going to be upsets. And the amount of double-digit upsets in college football might surprise people as well. So they're out there. They happen. Don't know if this one's going to happen, but we'll start to break down the team in particular. And what comes to mind, Joey, for Georgia Tech football, when I think back a season, not to put and throw any shade on your team here, but I remind people that if Mario Cristobal would have done the right thing, then the perception of what Georgia Tech is coming into this season would be drastically different. Now, would the reality be much different? Probably not, although they did make a remarkable draw. So Miami handed them the game on one hand, but of course, Georgia Tech had to make some ridiculous plays with not much time left, a ridiculous throw to the left sideline, then of course broke the coverage and made the play that won the game. So it wasn't just handed to them on a silver platter. However, of course, they lose that game. The perception of 7-6 is now 5-7 because they don't get the opportunity to win the game against UCF. And that's another thing that stands out to me. They're down by 2 touchdowns and they come back in the bowl game to finish with a winning season. And a big deal for them. And then the other is that they played Georgia as well as they did in Atlanta to close out the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk about that Miami game. So, and not to make all the whole thing about odds, but if memory serves, Georgia Tech played 4 games in a row where the favorite was a double-digit favorite. 2 of them Georgia Tech was favored. 2 of them Georgia Tech was underdogs. They went 2-2 in those games, and you'll never believe that the favorite didn't win a single one of them. So twice they were favored by 2 touchdowns or more, and they lost. Twice they were 2 touchdown underdogs and won. And so it's like, I don't know what to make of that. It was a really strange season kind of in that way, where you had a couple of massive brain fart games that you're like, what is this team? I can't have any confidence in this, whatever. And then they turn around and yes, like they find a way to beat Miami. But the thing that I would try to remind people is that that's only possible because that was a 4 or 5 point game in the final minute. You played them really close for 59 minutes. That's only possible because you did. So between that and then beating North Carolina, you mentioned playing really close with Georgia. Like it was a little bit up and down, but the peaks were pretty confidence inspiring. I thought that it really feels like Brent Key and his coaching staff are building something. And that's something that it never really felt like there for a few years post Paul Johnson under Jeff Collins. It really didn't feel like any progress was being made year over year. So I would say that's the confidence inspiring piece for sure. And then it's like if you can just figure out how to avoid those brain fart losses against Boston College and Bowling Green, I mean, it would have even been that much better. And you really weren't that far from having a really good season. Not to mention, I mean, you had a lead on Louisville in the fourth quarter and couldn't hold on, So a lot of what could have been, I guess, in both directions with Georgia Tech last year. And, you hope that the things that didn't go so well or the inconsistencies, you get those ironed out. And now you're prepared to take on what is a tough schedule, but, hopefully give you some positive results and be part of what makes other teams' schedules tough as well.
Get Joey Weaver on the line, the basketball podcast. You see the particulars right there with Joey and Mike McDaniel getting together to, of course, the play on words here, folks, is the ACC is a basketball conference, but these two get together to talk ACC football.
Yep. Basketball conference, the ACC football podcast. We've never made ourselves out to be marketing geniuses, but it's a loving name that we gave it.
There's a fine line between foolishness and genius. So maybe it'll flip one day. You're going to cross that line. All right.
We'll see.
With Haynes King back at quarterback, Joey, looking at, of course, we go through that process of evaluating, okay, we were this good this past year, and this is what happened. These are the additions. These are the subtractions. How should that convert now to 2024? So when you add all that up, what are we looking at?
I look at the transfer portal, kind of who came in, who went out, that kind of thing. Honestly, I don't know if this is like a drastically different team than it was last year. They return a lot of production on both sides of the ball. A couple of the folks that left on defense, I mean, you got pretty equivalent looking transfers in. I mean, I look at Kyle Kennard transfers out. He was probably your best pass rusher last year. Well, you get Romello Height transfers in from USC. That was a pretty good addition, I thought. You added Keelan Rutledge to the offensive line from Middle Tennessee. I think they're pretty excited about him. So, a lot of things like that I think they were able to maintain talent level here. Roster-wise, I'm honestly impressed with what Brent Key and the staff are doing. I think that they're recruiting at a higher level than we've seen at Georgia Tech since I started covering them, back when I was in college. So I think it's comforting from that standpoint that I think they're building some depth within this roster that, again, I think you look at record and you think that, oh, well, they're still, not that talented or they're not that good of a roster. I think they might be. I think they can hang with some of these teams, again, as you saw. And so from that standpoint, I think that they're geared up. It's more an issue. I think specifically I would look at the defense and the scheme and the coaching and the organization, some of those things that would really be the sticking point going into this year.
Joey, since Paul Johnson was there and advanced his team to conference championship games, major bowl games, a couple Orange Bowls, this program has been, to the average college football fan, just kind of lost in a sea of Syracuse and Kansas, whoever else is out there, just that they can't really get a handle on. What are they about? Who do they have? But obviously some positive signs last year. So the general consensus seems to be about middle of the pack ACC, but we know how good sports writers are at predicting standings. So who knows what that's going to land on. Let me give you this stat, Joey, that may give you some hope for a breakout season. Would be that it came to my attention 6-7 years ago and looking at these preseason publications, Athlon, Street and Smith's, Lindy's, that they're way too conservative with their predictions, because I'd be looking at these and I'd be like, they're considering everybody basically to be the same team, and they're just kind of moving their record by one game typically from season to season. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start to track this and see if this is actually what college football is, because I think most people think, yeah, college football is static, it doesn't change, but they're looking at Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia. Yeah, they don't change, but the rest of the sport's in flux. And so I started to track thinking, okay, 3 games is a significant difference in a season. You go from 3-9 to 6-6 or vice versa. So how many teams in the Power 5 change that much from season to season? Well, it's generally, and I asked this question to people and they guess, 7 or 8 teams. No, like 18 to 22 teams. Last year was 26 teams had that much of a swing in their record from season to season out of 70. So that's a third of the teams or more. And what's the likelihood that Georgia Tech's on the positive end of that swing, rather than that would have to be a 9-3 or a 3-9?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to be a homer and be overly optimistic here, but I would say that if you told me that they're going to be 3 games different from last year's 6-6, I would say better chance that it's 9-3 than 3-9. I just think depth wise, I think what they're able to do in the trenches, I don't think that they're going to go 3-9. I think there's upside when you have a quarterback like Haynes King who did what he did last year and started to show more consistency, and he got healthier during the year. I think a quarterback like that, I think that you look at a defense, they were 6-6 and a defense that was like bottom 30 in the country or something like that. You bring in a whole new staff, bring in your defensive coordinator, Tyler Santucci. He was Mike Elko's guy at Duke. I think that's some pretty good bona fides to have on your resume. So I think there's reason to think that they will improve rather than fall off going into this year. So yeah, I mean, I would say 9-3 more likely than 3-9, but I don't know how necessarily likely either of those are. For what that's worth.
I understand that that's a difficult call to make. 9-3 against that schedule, which I'm perusing right now. Yeah, there are a lot of landmines there. So Joey, before we let you go, focusing on this ACC situation, and sometimes when there's a little bit of news or somebody makes a comment, everybody reacts like, "Oh, this league's going to fall apart tomorrow." It's not. There's going to be an ACC maybe indefinitely if they're able to even bounce back like the Big 12 from some major losses that are probably imminent, because when you go to court to the extent that Clemson and Florida State have, I don't think there's any turning back. I think there's just way too much bad blood and money that's been spent. But off of their probable departures, then of course there's this wild speculation in regards to who's worth what. Well, Georgia Tech, well, these are the minuses, these are the pluses. They seem to be maybe in this tier with Louisville, NC State, where you can see some value, but at the same time, they're not necessarily going to move a needle in a conference at the same time. And I know a lot of people will push back on me putting them with NC State and Louisville. I'm not talking about as football teams right this second or in the last 5 years, but again, it's only been 10 years and less that they've been playing in ACC championship games and going to Orange Bowls. So what is your kind of read on the tea leaves of the way this could break and what Georgia Tech's possible options could be?
So I don't think of it in terms of if the ACC implodes and what would be the next conference. In a way, I would be very surprised if Georgia Tech ever ended up in another conference in the way that college football is currently constructed. The way that I think about it is, it's clear that we're moving towards a different model of this game. You're moving more towards some sort of NFL model of, the AFC and the NFC or something. There's going to be some breakaway of college football. My question becomes, how many teams make it to that next version, the Premier League or whatever it is? Because you hear people talk about, it could be, the top 32 programs go to that. I don't think Georgia Tech is one of those top 32 programs. I think most of those at this point are in the SEC and the Big Ten. But, if we draw the line at 48, do I think Georgia Tech's a top 48 program? Yeah, probably, or certainly in the conversation, reason to believe that they are, or any more than that. And I think there's a lot of ACC teams that applies to, where I don't think you make the cut on that kind of elite, high-end subset of teams, but pretty solid mid-level teams as well. Again, you mentioned a Louisville or an NC State. I don't know what, Virginia Tech is at this point as a brand, in value and things like that. But I think about those types of programs that certainly have a place and have been higher end football programs over the course of college football's history. But maybe aren't the very biggest fan bases, student bodies, alumni bases, like those kinds of things. So that's kind of the way that I think about it. Is it's going to depend on where we start drawing lines as to, does Georgia Tech make it into the elite end of whatever the next version of college football alignment is? Because depending on where you draw those cutoffs, maybe they make it, maybe they don't. They're kind of in that mid tier as you were talking about, Mark.
So, Joey, I did say that was one last question. No, this is one last question because I did want to look at the schedule because who knows when we'll be able to get you back. Uh, how do you shake this out? Are you the type that looks at, okay, we got this stretch of 5, we need to win 4 or 3, or this 3 is murderer's row? If we could just steal one here, take us through the schedule and let us know what you think of it. And another portion of this that I'm sure you and Mike have addressed at times is the larger these conferences get, the more obviously there are would-be opponents that you don't play in the same conference. So the math right now is 17 teams in the ACC. There's 16 possible opponents. You only play 8, so you miss half the conference. So the fairness and equity of the schedules gets dispersed, and there becomes very tough schedules and very easy schedules. Rutgers doesn't play the probable 5 best teams in the Big Ten this year, for example. So just take us through the schedule and how difficult you believe it to be.
Well, first of all, by any metric you look at this, you look at the toughest schedules in the country, and you're going to see a whole bunch of SEC schedules, a whole bunch of Big Ten schedules, and you're going to see Georgia Tech's schedule. They are, far and away by metrics, they are the toughest schedule in the ACC, which isn't really anything new if you've been following Georgia Tech over the years. And this is actually the first year since I believe 1983 that they won't play Clemson. And honestly, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, because it's like Clemson's starting to get a little bit more gettable, it seems like, than they had been for a number of years. But I guess to answer your question, Mark, I tend to like to group these games a little bit and say, you need to split these, you need to get 2 out of these 3, like that kind of thing. I certainly look at those first 5 games. Florida State, again, I think that's the time that you want to get them. A rebuilding team, get them on foreign soil, maybe as far out of their element as possible. You come home, and I think a lot of Georgia Tech fans are kind of terrified of that Georgia State game. Figuring you got to come back a week later and play a team just from across town that's going to be hungry. You're going to be a big favorite in that game, but that's going to be a Super Bowl type of game for Georgia State. So that won't be fun. You go to Syracuse, which has historically been kind of a painful place to play for Georgia Tech. They had a really ugly loss there in 2020. I think it was the only game that Syracuse won all year. They beat them at the JMA Wireless Dome there in upstate New York. VMI, you'd like to write that in as a win. And then you go to Louisville. That's pretty tough. And so, those first 5 games, it's a little bit treacherous. I would say you need to go, at least 3-2 on that stretch. Ideally 4-1, I would think, and to be set up to go to a bowl game and have a good postseason. The off week, you get Duke, you go to North Carolina. I think both of those should be winnable. I think Duke in a little bit of a rebuild under Manny Diaz. North Carolina, you've beaten them, and it's been traditionally, you've had some luck against North Carolina even when they've been good. And then it's this back end of the schedule is really kind of your murderer's row. Again, you get Notre Dame, you get Miami, NC State, and then Georgia is 4 of your last 5. And then you got a road trip to Lane Stadium to go play the Hokies. And that's a game. I think that's a good measuring stick game, honestly, for both of those programs. I think they're kind of in a similar place. You'd rather get that game at home, but you got to go on the road for it. So, they're up against it here, Mark, honestly. And you look at all those little numbers next to those teams' names. A lot of them are projected to be pretty good. And so I don't know how much you can bank on winning. I think you look at this the back half of the schedule. I think if you win 2 of them, you might be talking about an upset in there. I don't know how many of these you're going to be favored in to begin with. So it very much shapes up to be a challenge. And, one of the things you talk about not playing all the teams in the conference, Georgia Tech is actually one of the 2 programs in the ACC. I forget who the other one is, but they're one of the only 2 programs in the ACC that doesn't play any of the 3 new teams within the ACC. There's no SMU, no Cal, no Stanford, any of which I would feel a lot better about Georgia Tech's chances than I feel against, Miami and NC State and Florida State and so on and so forth.
Well, Joey, like you, I've seen all these schedule rankings, and I used to do them myself. and it just became so tedious, but it was fun. I used to rank all the schedules throughout the country, but like you, I've seen all SEC and Big Ten schools, and then boom, there's Georgia Tech at number 4, number 5, whatever the ranking is. And I know I've looked at their schedule at some point, but I am just now letting it sink in. Florida's become famous for their final 5 to 7 game stretch with, Ole Miss, LSU, Georgia constantly. But that is about as difficult as I got to think anybody else is playing in the country the final 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, this has got to be up there, right? And, thankfully a majority of these games are at home, which kind of helps you. Now, I don't know how much you would call Mercedes-Benz Stadium at home for the Notre Dame game, but, you get a couple of bye weeks in there. Getting Miami with in between 2 bye weeks is kind of an odd little quirk in the schedule, but, that I figure that kind of helps to some degree. Yeah, there's a comment from Jackson Johnson. North Carolina is the other school that doesn't have any of the 3 new programs on the schedule. So, yeah, just, it's kind of a strange scheduling quirk. Yeah, we're going to have to see. And again, I hope that Brent Key is building the program the way that I think he is. And at the very least, you're competitive in these games, and you never know. Again, a game like Miami last year where it just falls off the back of a truck, but you got to be in position to pick it up and run with it. So hopefully, at the very least, they're there. And, I think back the last 2 years under Brent Key's leadership, he's coached the game against Georgia, and they've given him a run for it. Both those last 2 games, much more than I think a lot of people expected them to. So maybe there's something there. Maybe you get that game for the first time since 2016. You get that win. But yeah, like I said, I mean, if you win more than 2 of those, it's pretty much certainly going to involve an upset somewhere. So I think you got to start fast if you want to get to a bowl game, looking at where that schedule is and where it falls.
All right, folks, your college football season begins with Georgia Tech this year, taking on Florida State, of course, week 0. That's the one we're all going to watch if we want to watch college football on the 24th of August. Well, enjoy it, Joey. We appreciate you stopping by. It's been great to see you and catch up. And before I botch it, because I do every time I attempt to, the podcast and where people can find it.
Absolutely. It's called Basketball Conference. It's an ACC football podcast, make no mistake, but it is called Basketball Conference. It's anywhere you can find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, whatever you do. Also on YouTube, youtube.com/@the-ACC football podcast. So come find us there. We do live recaps here during the season. We get on and we'd love to have people join us to give their comments and join in the discussion as we get into the college football season.
Awesome. Thanks, Joey.
Thanks,
Enjoy
Mark.
the game, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Yep, enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good stuff from Joey Weaver. Joey used to come on the channel like every week. We did a ACC breakdown every Wednesday night. We did a massive ACC show for like 2 hours every Wednesday night. Joey was one of our main guys for that. All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And of course, we have been presented today and throughout this week and throughout the month of August by Chris Gates Fitness. Training camp is the offer. Check out the link in the description section of the video. Keep in mind that we keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Oklahoma at 4, Clemson at 5:30, the trivia show at 9, and USC at 10. That's all Eastern time. We're here talking college football with you with tremendous guests. You always have the call-in option. And then also, of course, my possible rants, which I had about 3 other subjects to get to today, but we ran out of time. So there is plenty of time. We've got an entire football season in front of us. We will continue to take you through August up until the 24th, but Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, every day through the national championship game right here at the Voice of College Football. We'll see you later with Oklahoma live at 4 p.m. Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Chris here from Chris Gates Fitness and the online fitness training camp. Thanks for letting me pop in for a few seconds to tell you about what we got going on in training camp this month. And there's a lot happening, okay? The August program dropped just a few days ago. Everybody's getting into their August workouts, having a blast. The private group is full of discussion and chatter about people getting started, which I love to see. We're going to be doing weekly football pick'em here at the end of the month. That's when that starts. I'm going to be giving away free supplements to people who win that. I'm giving away a treadmill in September because we're doing a step count challenge as a group. All kinds of fun stuff coming. So I hope to see you there. Voice of College Football has a discount code VOICE. You can still get a discount on your first month if you want to jump in. Would love to see you there. Talk to you in training camp.